George?
No menus.
No, I'm Mrs. Riccardi, president of the Tenants Association.
Oh, right. Hey, I love the floors in here. It's like a gymnasium. Try and guard me. Come on.
George, unfortunately, Clarence Eldridge in 8C has decided that he wants the apartment.
Yeah, but you promised it to me.
Yes, but you see, Mr. Eldridge is an Andrea Doria survivor. And in light of the terrible suffering that he's already been through, we've decided to give it to him.
Well, the Andrea Doria, it was quite a fire.
Shipwreck.
I remember it.
Hi, welcome back to Robert's Ramblings. I'm Robert Trull. Today I want to talk about my family's connection to the Andrea Doria, or more precisely, my wife and her family's connection. It seems that everyone has heard of the beautiful Italian passenger ship that traversed the seas from Italy to New York, making more than 50 round trips before she met her demise in a tragic, and perhaps even more sadly, an extremely preventable accident. I read something the other day where the writer called it a cruise ship. That is an insult to such a great lady. Her passengers weren't a bunch of yahoos in cutoffs and flip-flops pushing their way up to the buffet line. And before I get irate comments, let me say my wife and I have been on 15 cruises on 3 lines, so we've seen it all. Far from an ordinary cruise ship, the Andrea Doria carried passengers in style, comfort, and elegance.
Many of these voyages had boasted Hollywood royalty like Cary Grant, Kim Novak, Orson Welles, and Joan Crawford, all fans of the young but already legendary vessel.
A bevy of beauty promenades on the new Italian line flagship, the Andrea Doria, displaying styles with an international flavor. All ashore that's going ashore.
The Andrea Doria was a sleek, beautiful ship, the fastest in the Italian line. Like the Titanic before her, she was ahead of her time, given all the bells and whistles 1950s maritime technology could offer. And like the Titanic, she was doomed to a watery grave. She was built in the Ansaldo shipyards of Genoa, Italy, and launched June 16, 1951, just 6 days after I was born. Her captain was perhaps the very best, most experienced captain employed by the Italian line, Piero Calamai. There were some initial mechanical problems with the ship, so her maiden voyage was delayed until January 14, 1953. She made 50 successful round-trip crossings from Genoa to America, but the 51st was her last. Still, her sinking taught the maritime world a great many lessons that made ship travel safer for all of us. But this video is not yet another retelling of the sinking of the Andrea Doria. This video is dedicated to the ship and the more than 40,000 immigrants she brought to America, mostly in third or cabin class, but some, like my wife and her parents, in tourist class. First class passage was wildly expensive and was thus way out of reach for all but the very wealthy. Before I go very far on the subject at hand, I should say a few words about the man this ship was named for, Andrea Doria. He was a citizen of Genoa in the 16th century and a great statesman, steering Genoa's course always to safer waters throughout his lifetime. He is perhaps best known as one of the greatest, most successful admirals and naval strategists of all times. The ruling bodies of Genoa, the great and small councils, wanted to make him ruler of Genoa for life, but after taking office, he instead reformed the constitution and term limited his position. His reformed constitution remained in place from around 1528 until 1797. He was so great a figure, famed artist Agnolo Bronzini, around 1535, was commissioned to paint a portrait of him portraying him as Neptune, the god of the sea. As one of the greatest Italian naval heroes, Several ships were named for him, including the SS Andrea Doria, 400 years later in 1950. My wife's family have fond memories of the ship, first-hand memories. My wife Jo, named Giuseppa Sanguidolce at birth, and her parents immigrated from Caltanissetta, Sicily to the United States, sailing from Naples on the 24th of May 1953 aboard the Andrea Doria in its first year of service. Her grandparents, Luigi and Maria, and her Aunt Lydia were aboard the Andrea Doria in 1955, 1 year before it sank off the coast of Nantucket. It was aboard the Andrea Doria that all their lives and futures in America began. The opulence of the ship was a paramount concern for the Italian line, properly known as, and forgive me for butchering this, the Società di Navigazione Italia. The ship was meant to represent the legends of Italy, and despite the uncertain financial viability of passenger ship traffic in the early 1950s, as air travel was gaining favor as the preferred means of transatlantic travel, still they spared no expense. The ship's public interior spaces were designed primarily by famed architect and designer Gio Ponti, working in his neoclassical style. Under his guidance and working alongside famed furniture designer Nino Zoncada, whose mid-century modern designs are still very popular and commercially successful to this day, the ship essentially became a floating art gallery displaying the works of famous Italian artists like Salvatore Fiume and Emanuele Luzzati. Ponti brought in artist and designer Giulio Minoletti to design the suites and some of the cabins. Giovanni Paganini was commissioned to create a bronze statue of Admiral Doria. Here you can see Admiral Doria spending some time with Joan Crawford and Captain Calamai. The statue has since been retrieved from the seafloor and returned to Italy after restoration. Here you can see more items that have been salvaged. My wife and her parents came to America with little money, but with dreams of having their own business. Joe was only 3 and remembers almost nothing about the ship. Joe's grandparents, Luigi and Maria Scarlatta, were American citizens, having lived in America before returning to Sicily prior to World War II and opening the Extra Bar in Caltanissetta. That American name infuriated the Nazi occupiers of Caltanissetta after Mussolini's demise, and they forced Grandpa Louis to change it. As soon as the Americans arrived, he changed the name back, and it drew American soldiers like sugar draws flies. But, as always, I digress. Louis, called Commendatore or Commander by the locals, bought the Andrea Doria tickets to help his daughter and son-in-law on their way, and gave them good advice to help them get established in Rochester, New York, where Ioli's sister awaited them. They traveled from Caltanissetta to Palermo and took a ship there, the Sicilia, to cross the Mediterranean to Naples, where they would board the Andrea Doria. Here's a picture of Joe, her mother, and her grandparents in Palermo beside that ship. Here's another picture of Joe and her Uncle Filippo, her dad's brother, on the deck. In Naples, they boarded the Andrea Doria. Here are a couple of images of their actual ticket. The ticket shows that Joe traveled for half price. They were to stay in cabin 326, and that Joe and her father were Italian citizens. And here's the passport they traveled on. But Ioli was an American citizen. Her parents passed citizenship down to her from their earlier time in America. It was not uncommon in those days for Italians to sojourn between Italy and America in an effort to find the best place to put down roots and prosper. Ioli was terribly seasick almost the entire crossing, but towards the end, it was decided that fresh air would be her best medicine, so Papa paid from his limited funds for her to have a deck chair to recuperate in. When they arrived in America, they had to disembark in separate places since Ioli was an American citizen, who, by the way, could speak absolutely no English. As they were processed through immigration and customs, the total strangers there gave them new names. Providenza wouldn't do. Her American name was now Prudence. Her Italian name was Providence, not Prudence, but the perhaps not even high school educated customs workers felt like they knew best. Salvatore, Joe's dad, became Sam. Not Sal, Sam. Joe's future Uncle Salvatore at some point also became Sam. At least they were consistent. Papa was happy with his new name, but Mom was not. She used one of her other 5 names, Yoli, instead. She can tell you all of her names, but you better pack a lunch. In 1955, Luigi, Maria, and their youngest daughter Lydia came over on the Andrea Doria to stay. Here they are in one of the salons having a fine time with the other passengers. Just look at how lovely and fashionable Lydia looks. She was only 16 at the time. And speaking of time, I think it's time I got to the point of this video. The United States has always had a couple of other names in addition to USA and America. We have always been called the land of the free, the home of the brave. But our most important name to the rest of the world has always been the land of opportunity. Immigrants who come here are disparaged as arriving with their hands out, wanting a free ride. But the vast majority of immigrants to this great nation of ours come here looking for opportunity. And by opportunity, I just mean a chance. All they want is a chance. They're not here to pick anyone's pocket. And when they succeed, if that makes the average American jealous and angry, then they should get off their asses and work as hard as these immigrants do. I don't want to cut grass or work in a sweatshop, which is what my mother-in-law had to do, sewing piecework. I don't want to have to pick fruit or work in the slaughterhouse, killing and processing sheep, cattle, and chickens. Immigrant workers are willing to do the dirty jobs to sustain themselves until they can do better. And the sad truth is, we despise them for it. My wife's family came here from Sicily with nothing, and through hard, honest work, faith in their Lord God, and sheer determination, they built beautiful, happy, productive lives for themselves and their families. That's the American dream. That's America's greatness. That's the proverbial melting pot. If there's a better way to build a nation, to build a society we can be proud of, I swear I don't know where you might find it. But the Andrea Doria brought at least 40,000 immigrants to our door who have enriched our culture, and I thank God every day my wife and her family came and flourished and became Americans we can all be proud of. Now, I had intended to end this episode right here, but after speaking with some friends, I was convinced that despite the fact that I didn't intend to deal with the shipwreck itself, I should actually take some time to talk about the aftermath. Despite an extensive maritime investigation of the accident, due to a legal settlement between the 2 shipping companies, brokered by their insurance carrier, Lloyd's of London, no statement of blame was ever released. However, internationally, the sentiment seems to be on the Swedish side, indicating they thought the Andrea Doria was at fault for the accident. There were, however, many experts who disagreed with that assessment. In 2006, PBS broadcast an episode of their series, The Secrets of the Dead, called The Sinking of the Andrea Doria. They can tell the tale much better than I can.
At the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in New York, the investigation was reopened in 1971. A curious naval expert named John Carruthers conducted a study using both ships' course records. Working backwards from the point of impact, he concluded that the Stockholm had caused the collision. He claimed Karstens had misread his radar, thinking the Andrea Doria was 3 times farther away than she actually was. By the time he realized his mistake, it was too late to change course. Carruthers' findings are still taught today at the Academy.
There is no doubt in my mind. I believe that Karstens Johansson misinterpreted the radar. It's the only logical conclusion that I can draw from the collision.
Myrn hangs a photo of Captain Calamai in his classroom.
I think it was exemplary. I felt sorry for the man. I think it was unfairly blamed, but I think what he did was extraordinary.
In March of 1972, Carruthers sent Calamai the results of his study, hoping to release the broken captain from his guilt. He ended with these words: "Rest assured, Captain Calamai, there are many of us who would be more than willing to serve under your command at any time." But Calamai didn't have the heart to open the letter. He kept it in a drawer and died a month later. According to his daughters, his final words were, "Are the passengers saved?"
There's one more thing I have to show you, and I have to warn you, it's not pleasant to look at. I had always heard that some of the deceased passengers from the Andrea Doria were actually found in the bow of the Stockholm. When the Stockholm pierced the side of the Andrea Doria, apparently when they backed away, they carried out some of the deceased passengers with them. I had never seen any evidence of that until recently, and I'm going to show you that evidence now. And looking closely at the photograph, I began to see two females. I say females because I'm not sure whether they're women, adolescents, or even children. But they're joined together in death in the wreckage inside the Stockholm. Here you can see the two women closer up. One with her right arm slightly behind her head, her right leg crossed over her left. You can see a wide open-toed sandal. You can see her party dress. You can see her face. She's looking back to her right as if at the last instant she looked back at her companion in death. That woman is looking towards her. And they must have been having a lovely evening, a pleasant conversation. And suddenly the Stockholm blasted through the wall, killing them instantly and eventually dragging them from the ship they sailed on and completing their voyage to New York in the bow of the Stockholm. We don't know how long we have on this earth. If you have loved ones, you need to tell them today how much you love them, how much they mean to you. Do it now, don't wait. For Robert's Ramblings, I'm Robert Trull. Thank you for watching, and come on back.